Joseph Murphy is one of those writers where the more time you spend with his ideas, the more layers you find beneath what initially looks like simple positive thinking. Let me start where I think most people should start with Murphy. Not with his most famous book, but with the question of what he actually believed he was doing. Murphy wasn't positioning himself as a self-help writer in the modern sense. He genuinely believed he was teaching applied theology. He was an ordained minister in the Church of Divine Science, and everything he wrote, every technique, every affirmation, every instruction about sleep and the subconscious was, in his own mind, an explanation of how prayer actually works at a mechanical level. He thought he was answering the question that most religious people never ask. Why does prayer sometimes produce results, and why does it sometimes not? That framing changes how you read him completely. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind isn't a productivity book dressed in spiritual language. It's Murphy's attempt to give a functional, almost engineering-level account of the relationship between the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and what he called infinite intelligence.
So let's start with the core architecture of Murphy's entire system, because once you understand the structure, everything else he teaches clicks into place. Murphy believed the human mind operates on two distinct levels. The conscious mind, which he sometimes called the objective mind, is the part you're using right now to read these words. It reasons, it analyzes, it chooses, it rejects. It is the gatekeeper. It is the part of you that can say, "That's not true," or "I don't believe that." The subconscious mind, the subjective mind in his terminology, operates completely differently. It does not reason, it does not argue, it does not evaluate whether something is true or false, helpful or harmful, real or imagined. It simply accepts whatever is impressed upon it with sufficient feeling and repetition, and then moves with extraordinary power to bring that impression into physical reality. That distinction is the engine of everything Murphy ever wrote.
And here's the thing that makes it genuinely interesting, rather than just another positive thinking framework. Murphy was pulling from multiple traditions simultaneously and synthesizing them into something coherent. He was drawing from William James, an early American psychology. He was drawing from Phineas Quimby, the 19th century mental healer who influenced virtually the entire New Thought movement. He was drawing from Neville Goddard, with whom he had a close intellectual relationship. He was drawing from Carl Jung's concept of the unconscious, though Murphy's version was considerably more optimistic than Jung's. And he was drawing from his own reading of Scripture, which he interpreted almost entirely symbolically rather than literally. When Murphy quotes the Bible, he is almost never talking about historical events. He is talking about psychological processes. Egypt, in Murphy's reading, is always the state of fear and limitation. The Promised Land is always the consciousness of abundance and freedom. Moses is always the conscious mind, leading the people, the habitual patterns of fault, out of bondage into a new way of being. That's a significant thing to understand about him. He was essentially a psychologist wearing a minister's collar, and the language of religion was his preferred vocabulary for describing inner states.
Now, let's talk about the subconscious more carefully, because Murphy's account of it is more sophisticated than most people realize when they first encounter his work. He taught that the subconscious mind has three characteristics that make it both enormously powerful and genuinely dangerous if you don't understand how it works. The first characteristic is that it is always working. It never sleeps. It never takes a break. While your conscious mind rests at night, the subconscious continues processing, continues building, continues moving in the direction of whatever has been impressed upon it most deeply. This is why Murphy placed such enormous emphasis on the hypnagogic state, that threshold between waking and sleep,
where the conscious mind's critical faculty begins to dissolve and the subconscious becomes directly accessible.
He taught that the last thought held in mind before sleep is impressed on the subconscious with unusual force, not because of any mystical property of nighttime, but because the resistance of the conscious mind, its tendency to argue, to doubt, to counter-suggest, drops away as you drift toward sleep. Whatever you plant in that moment of openness goes in clean, without interference. This is why Murphy's techniques so often involve what he calls the drowsy state, that half-awake, half-asleep condition where you are relaxed enough that the gatekeeper is off duty, but conscious enough to deliberately choose what you're impressing on the deeper mind. The second characteristic is that the subconscious mind cannot distinguish between a real experience and a vividly imagined one. Murphy didn't invent this idea. It appears in various forms in William James, in early hypnotherapy research, and later it would show up in sports psychology, where athletes were taught that mentally rehearsing a performance with sufficient vividness produces measurable physiological changes nearly identical to physical practice.
But Murphy took this further than most. He said the subconscious doesn't just respond similarly to real and imagined experience, it responds identically. If you can construct an internal experience of your desired reality with enough sensory and emotional specificity, the subconscious receives it as fait accompli, as something that has already happened. And once the subconscious receives something as already having happened, it begins working through what Murphy called ways and means you know not of, to make the outer reality conform to the inner impression. That phrase is worth pausing on. Ways and means you know not of. Murphy was making a very specific point. He did not believe you needed to consciously know how your desired outcome would come about. He thought the conscious mind's insistence on seeing the path was actually one of the primary obstacles to the subconscious doing its work. The conscious mind says, I don't see how this could happen, therefore I doubt it. That doubt is itself an impression on the subconscious, and it cancels the original instruction. He used the analogy of a ship's navigator. You don't need to understand every current, every wind pattern, every mechanical process of the engine. You set the destination. The ship finds the way.
The third characteristic of the subconscious is the one that most people find either most fascinating or most troubling, depending on their temperament. The subconscious is compelled to express outwardly whatever it holds inwardly as true. Murphy taught that your current life, your finances, your health, your relationships, the texture of your daily experience is a precise printout of the dominant beliefs held in your subconscious mind. Not your wishes, not your conscious intentions, your deep, habitual, emotionally charged beliefs. And this creates a problem that Murphy returned to again and again throughout his teaching, because most people's subconscious beliefs were not chosen deliberately. They were absorbed in childhood, inherited from parents and culture, formed through repeated painful or joyful experiences, installed by authority figures in moments when the conscious mind's defenses were down.
You may consciously want wealth, but if somewhere in the architecture of your subconscious there is a belief that money is corrupting, or that rich people are dishonest, or that you are fundamentally unworthy of abundance, that belief will quietly, systematically, invisibly undermine every conscious effort you make. Murphy called these installed negative beliefs race mind conditioning, the accumulated negative hypnosis of collective human experience passed down through generations, the belief that life is a struggle, that suffering is noble, that wanting more than you have is greedy, that illness is inevitable, that old age means decline. He thought most human suffering was not the result of external forces,
but of unconscious auto-suggestion. People continuously impress negative expectations on the subconscious through worry, fear, resentment, and habitual negative self-talk, and then experiencing the external manifestation of those impressions and calling it fate or bad luck or God's will.
That's a confronting idea. It has obvious limits, and it raises real ethical questions, which we should absolutely get into. But before we go there, I want to make sure you're feeling the weight of what Murphy was actually claiming, because it's more radical than it first appears. He wasn't saying, think positive and good things will happen. He was saying that consciousness itself is causative, that mind is primary, that what appears to be the external, solid, independent world is in a very real sense downstream of inner states of consciousness. That puts him not just in the New Thought tradition, but in a lineage that goes back through idealist philosophy, through Berkeley, through Kant in certain readings, through the Hindu concept of Maya, all the way to the oldest traditions that have insisted in various ways that reality is mind-dependent at a more fundamental level than our ordinary experience suggests. Murphy just happened to package that metaphysics in a form that a mid-20th century American could pick up at an airport bookstore and apply on Monday morning. Now, here's where I want to shift the conversation slightly, because Murphy's techniques are inseparable from his theory. Understanding what he believed explains why he taught the specific practices he taught. He identified several primary methods for impressing the subconscious, and each one exploits a specific vulnerability in the gatekeeper, the conscious mind's critical faculty. The first and most fundamental is repetition. The conscious mind can reject a single statement. It cannot indefinitely resist a statement that is repeated with feeling over a sustained period. This is the basis of affirmations, not as a form of wishful thinking, but as a deliberate reprogramming operation. You are not trying to convince yourself of something in a single conversation. You are wearing down the resistance through sheer frequency until the new belief becomes the path of least resistance for the subconscious.
Murphy was very specific about the role of feeling in this process. Repetition without feeling, he said, is largely ineffective. The subconscious is moved by emotion, not by words. The words are a vehicle. The feeling they carry is the actual instruction. A single affirmation spoken with genuine conviction and emotional aliveness does more work than 100 mechanical repetitions said with the flat affect of someone reading a shopping list. This is why so many people try affirmations and report that nothing happens. They are saying the words. They are not feeling the reality behind the words. Murphy would say they are operating entirely on the surface, moving their lips without touching the deeper mind at all. The second method is visualization, or what Murphy sometimes called the mental movie. He instructed his students to construct a detailed, sensory-rich internal scene that would imply that their desired outcome had already been achieved. Not an image of getting there, an image of already being there.
This distinction is subtle, but Murphy considered it critical. If you visualize yourself trying to achieve something, or on the way to something, you are impressing the subconscious with a state of incomplete striving. The subconscious obliges by maintaining that state indefinitely. If instead you visualize the scene that would exist after the achievement, yourself in the new house, having the conversation with a healthy doctor, sitting at the desk of the new position, you are impressing completion, wholeness, the thing already done. And then you feel what it would feel like to be in that scene. Not what you think you should feel, what you would actually feel. The relief, the gratitude, the ease,
of the quiet satisfaction. That emotional state is the signal that reaches the subconscious most clearly.
Murphy had a phrase he used constantly that I think is one of the most useful things he ever said. Your subconscious mind takes you at your word. What he meant was that the subconscious is utterly literal. It has no capacity for irony, no tolerance for ambiguity about what you actually want, no ability to discount what you say because you were stressed or joking or just venting. When you say, "This traffic is killing me," the subconscious doesn't know you're exaggerating. When you say, "I can't afford it," the subconscious doesn't know you mean not right now. When you say, "I'm terrible with names," the subconscious doesn't know you're being self-deprecating to seem relatable in conversation. It takes you at your word, and then it works with all the power at its disposal to make what you said true.
Murphy thought this was behind a vast amount of human suffering that people attributed to external causes. The person who says, "I always get sick in winter," and then gets sick in winter. The person who says, "I'm not lucky," and then watches luck seem to pass them consistently by. The person who says, "Relationships never work out for me," and then finds with bewildering regularity that relationships don't work out for them.
He wasn't blaming these people. He was pointing to a mechanism they were operating unconsciously. And he believed that once you saw the mechanism, you could take your hand off the controls that were producing results you didn't want and start deliberately choosing what to operate instead.
Murphy thought this was behind a vast amount of human suffering that people attributed to external causes. The person who says, "I always get sick in winter," and then gets sick in winter. The person who says, "I'm not lucky," and then watches luck seem to pass them consistently by. The person who says, "Relationships never work out for me," and then finds with bewildering regularity that relationships don't work out for them. He wasn't blaming these people. He was pointing to a mechanism they were operating unconsciously. And he believed that once you saw the mechanism, you could take your hand off the controls that were producing results you didn't want and start deliberately choosing what to operate instead.
This is where Murphy diverges sharply from secular psychology. A psychologist might say the subconscious is a powerful repository of learned patterns and automated processes. Murphy agreed with that as far as it went, but he thought it was only the beginning of the story. He thought the subconscious was a doorway. And what lay beyond that doorway was not just your own accumulated experience, but the whole of what he sometimes called the infinite storehouse. Unlimited intelligence, unlimited creative power, unlimited capacity to solve problems, heal bodies, generate ideas, attract resources.
He taught that prayer, properly understood, was not talking to an external God located somewhere in the sky. It was the deliberate, feeling-toned communication of the conscious mind with this deeper intelligence. The act of impressing a clear, confident, emotionally alive desire on the subconscious and then releasing it with complete trust that the deeper intelligence would handle the execution. The release was as important as the impression. Murphy was insistent about this. Holding on to the desire with anxious, grasping attention was itself a form of doubt. It implied that you didn't actually trust the deeper mind to handle it. You impress it, you feel it is done, and then you let it go. The way you plant a seed in soil and then don't dig it up every morning to check if it's growing. He had a beautiful analogy he returned to often. He said the relationship between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is like the relationship between a gardener and the soil.
The soil has no opinions about what you plant. It will grow roses with the same indifferent generosity it grows weeds. It does not reward you for good intentions or punish you for bad ones. It simply grows what is planted. The gardener, the conscious mind, is responsible for choosing the seeds. That is the entire extent of the gardener's responsibility. The soil, the subconscious, the infinite intelligence behind it does everything else.
The problem, Murphy said, is that most people are not gardening. They are letting the wind blow seeds in. They are inheriting whatever their parents planted before them. They are absent-mindedly scattering seeds of fear and resentment and lack, while consciously wanting harvests of abundance and health and love. And then they are bewildered by what grows. All right, I want to pause here and open this up, because we've covered the architecture and the core techniques, and I think we need to sit with some honest questions about all of this before we go further. Because Murphy's system raises real problems that serious engagement requires you to wrestle with rather than brush aside.
The most obvious one is the problem of suffering that has nothing to do with belief. A child born into poverty in a famine region, person struck by a genetic illness, the victims of natural disasters, wars, systemic oppression. Murphy's framework, taken to its logical conclusion, implies that consciousness is causative in all of these cases, which leads to a conclusion that many people find not just philosophically wrong, but morally repugnant, that suffering is always, at some level, self-created. Murphy was aware of this tension. He didn't resolve it entirely satisfactorily, in my view. He would talk about race-mind consciousness, the idea that collective human consciousness generates collective conditions, so individual suffering can be the result of the dominant beliefs of the group rather than purely the individual's own subconscious programming. But that's a soft answer to a hard question. The second problem is the question of verification. Murphy's system is, in a technical sense, unfalsifiable. If your desired outcome manifests, the teaching is confirmed. If it doesn't manifest, the explanation is always that your subconscious held a contradicting belief that you weren't aware of. There is no outcome that could, in principle, disprove the system, which is either a sign that it is describing something genuinely real and deep, or a sign that it is a closed logical loop with no exit.
And the third problem, which I find the most philosophically interesting, is the question of what the subconscious actually is. Murphy uses the term with great confidence and specificity, but the history of psychology suggests we should be considerably more humble about how much we actually understand about the architecture of mind. Freud's unconscious, Jung's unconscious, the cognitive unconscious of modern neuroscience, and Murphy's subconscious are not the same thing described differently. They are genuinely different theoretical constructs with different implications. Murphy was working with a model that was already somewhat dated by the time he was writing, and considerably more so now. Does any of that mean his techniques don't work? Not necessarily. There is substantial evidence that practices like visualization, affirmation, and deliberate emotional rehearsal do produce real measurable effects on behavior, motivation, neurological states, and outcomes. The mechanism Murphy proposed to explain why they work may be partially or substantially wrong. The practices themselves may still be valuable. That's an important distinction to hold between the technology and the theory behind it.
We could go deeper into his specific techniques, the sleep method, the thank you prayer, the infinite intelligence meditation, the way he approached healing specifically. Tell me in the comment box if you want me to make video at specific topic. Follow for more such videos. I would really appreciate if you like and subscribe my channel to encourage me to keep making videos.